in a moment. I will get this underway, I think. And
Yeah,
then,
do.
Good.
There's always people who book and don't come, you know.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's lovely to be able to welcome you today to St. Peter Mancroft Church. My name's Edward Carter and I'm the vicar here. And Heritage Open Days and Heritage Open Week is a great institution, and in past years it's seen a huge number of events. And at one point we worried that this year there wouldn't really be much at all because of all that's happened. However, there are a good number of things happening. There are places open, there are all sorts of outdoor things happening in particular. But here at St. Peter Mancroft Church, we have a series of 5 Heritage Open Day talks through this week. And they're being given here in the building to an audience that's actually gathered, but they're also being filmed and put up on our YouTube channel, so it's possible to watch it while it's happening, but also to catch up. So if you're watching on YouTube, lovely, thank you for joining us, and a warm welcome to those of you who are actually here in the building. And it just falls to me to welcome our extremely distinguished speaker this morning, my good friend Barbara Miller. Barbara, you probably know more about this city and this church, certainly, than anyone else, and it's just a delight for us that you're here to speak today about some of the memorials, to bring these people alive for us today. Here at St. Peter Mancroft. So Barbara was a former church warden here. She's been steeped in the life of the church here for many, many years. Barbara, thank you for speaking for us today. Perhaps we can welcome her in the usual way.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and what a pleasure. When you enter almost every parish church, you see monuments on the walls and on the floor, and Mancroft is no exception. Who are these people? Why do they wish to be remembered? Why are the floor slabs all jostled together, get one more in? Has this aspiration to be remembered always been there? Has it changed over the years? In early days, those remembered were largely the great of the land, alabaster figures of landed gentry, of bishops and of members of the royal family, all painted in brilliant colours and very costly to produce. Before the Reformation, when England was a Catholic country, the attitude to life and death was different. The words ora pro anima, pray for my soul, were what you saw. Wall paintings showing the doom with its torments of hell struck the hearts of the faithful, especially at times of plague, bad harvests, cattle disease, all considered signs of God's displeasure, so the need for piety, penitence, and absolution was paramount. Death was a certainty, redemption was not. Gifts in life and after death, money for masses to be said, sometimes every day, sometimes on a person's particular saint's day, sometimes forever. These were the memorials, together with the entry in the Book of the Dead, which was turned every day as we still do it here. You could tell that it was the rich who were inside from a lovely little memorial slab that I found, not in this church. Here I lie at the chancel door, here I lie because I'm poor. The further in, the more you pay, but here I lie as warm as they. Then all changed. The break from Rome, prayers for the dead and chantries were swept away. The destruction of the great religious houses meant more emphasis was centred on parish churches, and the emergent merchant population wished to enhance their church, which would be their last resting place. Away with ora pro anima, and instead we find hic jacet, here lies. Here lies, and commemorative tablets begin to appear. It is in this context of religious, visual, social, and philosophical influences that we should view the monuments here in Mancroft. We live in changing times, and as we shall see, in that we are not unique. When we come into a church, we are standing on the roots of our past. These people commemorated here are part of our history. They are what has made us. Do they have a resonance with us today? I think they do. Can we learn from them? I think we can. So let us go into the chapel on the north side here, the Jesus Chapel, to number 1 on your handout, or to give the chapel its full name, the Holy Name of Jesus and John the Baptist. We are told Black Lives Matter. Here in Mancroft, we think all lives matter. And certainly the Reverend Charles Thomas Chapman, who is the man up there in that sarcophagus-like memorial, agreed. For it was he who baptized on the 30th of May, 1813, 3 West African boys rescued by Rear Admiral Irby of Boyland Hall, commander of the West African Squadron, from a slave ship, and he presented them here for baptism. They are listed in the registers as Father Unknown and given English names. Sadly, we do not know their later lives, but Chapman was chairman of the Norwich Charity Schools, so hopefully he was able to set them on a path to a fulfilling life. Further along in the chapel, number 2 on your handout, the large tomb with the half figure is to Francis Wyndham, second son of the owner of Felbrigg Hall. Originally, it would have been highly coloured, with all the heraldry manifest. During the Civil War, when we had a very inflammatory Puritan preacher here, John Carter, probably then all the colour was removed. Wyndham was the law officer for the city under the reign of Elizabeth I and was a sergeant at law, a very distinguished position in the legal hierarchy of the country. Do notice, if you go and look at him, that he is wearing a little linen bonnet or coif. This he would have worn always, even in front of the monarch, signifying no one is above the law, a precept valid to this day. You can see a similar coif on pictures of Sir Thomas More. Somewhere in this chapel, Robert Topps, the builder of Dragon Hall, is buried because he lived in the parish. He gave a spectacular window for the chapel, partly destroyed in the great explosion in Bethel Street in 1648 in what had been Francis Wyndham's house. Similar, indeed, to the terrorist attacks we have witnessed. The explosion devastated 5 windows in the church, and the politics of the day forbade depictions of saints, so the glass was swept up and left for several years, and what remained to be put back is in the great west window you see today. Only 11 panels of the Topps window survive, and most are incorporated in the west window, including the one showing Robert Topps and his 2 wives. It is 3A on your picture, and it is the bottom row on the far right-hand side. He was 4 times mayor of the city, represented the city in Parliament, but when political flavour changed, he spent some time in prison in London. And you see him with his 2 wives, and you get St. John the Evangelist for good measure, because when they came to put the window back, they obviously had this sort of odd saint's head, so they popped it in. And although St. John lived to be the oldest of all the apostles, he is always shown in iconography as a golden-headed boy, and there he is over the shoulder of one of the wives. Also in the window, you see on the bottom row 2 windows which have a lot of yellow in them, and they are to the Ellis and Garnish family, who also gave windows to the church. They built the south porch, which you will see is much smaller. When you go out of the north porch, you will see that it's much bigger than the south porch, and their coats of arms are both on the porch and in the window over the porch on the inside. Along with tops in the chapel are buried 8 men killed in Kett's rebellion in 1549. In the churchyard are buried a further 49 rebels from a skirmish on the marketplace. And for over 200 years, a service was held on the Sunday nearest the 29th of September, known as Commotion Sunday, in thanksgiving for the defeat of the rebellion. Rebellion was not a word in the language in 1549. It's known in all the records as commotion, of the Kett's commotion. The rebellion was ostensibly over the enclosure of common land, but at heart it was looking back to a perceived golden age at a time when too many established institutions were being swept away. Number 5, we hear in our day of countries enduring the worst of all wars, civil war. Sir Thomas Browne, who is up here on the chancel on this side, came to Norwich and set up practice as a physician. He lived where Primark is now and worshipped in this church. It is his statue, of course, that you see on the Haymarket. Although in my day, as a city guide, many times I heard visitors say, "Why have they got a statue of Shakespeare here?" Because, of course, he does look slightly like the presentation of Shakespeare. In the English Civil War, neither Thomas nor his beloved wife Dorothy liked the Puritan minister here, so they stayed at home and rode out the years. They lived at the time of the Great Plague of London, their epidemic, and knew about the fire of London in 1666. They knew sadness, for only 5 of their 12 children survived to adulthood. But they did have the joy of a grandson, little Tommy, who spent a lot of time here with his grandparents and his adoring aunts. Edward, Sir Thomas's son, himself a distinguished physician and member of the Royal Society, was present at the deathbed of Charles II, who had knighted Sir Thomas in St Andrew's Hall in 1671, which was our last great royal visit until the late 19th century. It was Sir Thomas who first designated the Norfolk Broads as a unique natural feature, making a study of the flora and the fauna, care for the environment that we talk so much about. Sir Thomas and Lady Dorothy are opposite each other near the high altar. His memorial is in Latin, hers is in English. She outlived him, but only for about 3 or 4 years. We hear much about the problem of mental illness, and Mary Chapman, founder of the Bethel Hospital, pioneered the care of men and women suffering in her day. On the north wall of the church, which is the black one over there, under the huge one above, is to members of the Starling family. They were the builders and carpenters who had the contract for building the Bethel Hospital. Up the street, now overclad by Victorian additions, but if you walk round the back, you can see the original. Mary worshipped here, but is buried beside her husband in Thorpe Church, where he had served as vicar. By the Starlings, below him, is a brass plaque to Sir James Edward Smith and his wife Pleasance. James was a botanist, founder of the Linnean Society, Fellow of the Royal Society, and it is the Linnean Society which is still the body responsible for registering and naming the natural world. His parents and grandparents are in the North Transept there, and he wrote the inscriptions that are on their memorials. They did not attend, they lived on the walk on the corner of White Lion Street, and James' father was a linen draper. They did not attend here. They were members of the Octagon Chapel in Colgate, so a fine example of ecumenism. James was the champion of the natural world, something dear to our hearts today. We hear too that our population is aging, of which of course I am an example. Pleasance lived until she was 104 with all her faculties. Guess who was her relative? Alice Pleasance Liddell, for whom Charles Dobson, Lewis Carroll wrote Alice in Wonderland. Opposite here on the south wall is George Stacey, who was a bookseller in London Street. Many people now rely on a Kindle rather than a book. When the inventory of the shop was taken on Stacey's death, there were surprisingly few books, but there were hundreds of folio sheets. Why? On visits to great houses like Blickling and Felbrigg, we see libraries with many books in uniform bindings. So, when the owner of such a property ordered a book from Mr. Stacey, he would say deferentially, "Your usual binding, my lord," and it would be done. Much better than a Kindle. Recently, we commemorated the 70th, number 10 on your sheet, the VJ Day, and the Far East Prisoner of War Association for many years held their service here. I remember very well the final service. The church was packed, and groups of elderly men stood around talking, greeting each other, white-haired, shoulders stooped, leaning on walking sticks. The door opened, and in came Tom Eaton, bowler hat, rolled umbrella, shoulders straightened, and all eyes focused on him, for he had been the commander in Changi and had earned the respect of everyone, including the Japanese. And I saw the meaning of leadership. It was a salutary moment. The lovely oval plaque is the association's parting gift to the church, along with the furnishings of the Lady Chapel close by. Mr. Eaton's shield is along the wall here, marking the year he was Lord Mayor. Continuing on the south wall, we see a collection of memorials to the Paterson family. Life is made difficult studying them, for all the men are either called John or Henry. John, with a wife Mary, built the great red brick house in Surrey Street, part of the Aviva complex, and was mayor of the city in 1766. He had no children, and his wife died in her early 30s, as had his brother Henry. Generously, he gave a home to his sister-in-law, Martha, a redoubtable woman of Dutch descent, and his 2 nephews. Riots are a present element in our lives, and they were in John's day. High price of bread and food shortages meant when he was mayor, he had to read the Riot Act, a statutory obligation, from the balcony in the Guildhall. Leaving his house and fearing for his life and the safety of the mayoral chain, he left it with Martha, saying, "Take care of this little mother, for God knows if I will come back alive." Riots have occurred all through history by those wishing to change the status quo instantly. Often they don't succeed, but the seed is sown, and in time, change does come. John Paterson was originally in the wool trade, but aware that the industry was declining as a result of the Industrial Revolution in the north of England, he diversified, bought a small brewery, which is the origin of Stewart and Paterson. It survived until the 1970s. Well done, Uncle John. A cluster of doctors, number 13, is found near the north door. And on the northwest facing wall at the west end is John Addy and lots of other members of his family. John was a member of the committee responsible for building the first Norfolk and Norwich hospital. Nearby is a modern plaque to the Norwich City Police Force, founded in 1836 and becoming the county police in 1968. The plaque is by David Holgate, the distinguished Norwich sculptor, and shows their original individual cap badge. For those of you who may be interested, if you want to read a book that leaves an almost permanent smile on your face, I commend the book about the Norwich Police Force called A Force Remembered, because it shows that in 1836 they were learning how to be policemen. They couldn't ask anyone else because it hadn't been done before. And some of the early stories are absolutely hilarious. So, what of women? Well, they feature, as you might guess, largely as either wives or daughters, together with their husbands or fathers, except for one spectacular celebration of the 4 sisters of Thomas Gillett, number 16 on your list. And that is that they are the subject of this amazing window in the north transept. This was St Nicholas Chapel, endowed by a fishmonger on Norwich Market as his chantry originally. And of course, St Nicholas is the patron saint of fishermen. And so here we see the four sisters of Thomas Gillett. They are represented with the saints who had similar attributes to themselves. St. Dorothy has a basket of roses. She is for the sister who was a great gardener. St. Margaret, with her dragon, is for the sister who was attacked by poor health. St. Barbara, with her windowless tower, is for the sister imprisoned in an unhappy marriage. And St. Cecilia, playing her organ, is for the sister who was a gifted musician. Other symbolic feminine attributes are there as well, along with eminent women at the top. The foundress of Ely Cathedral, Elizabeth Fry, Florence Nightingale, and St. Julian of Norwich. They are the four figures right at the very top. Of course, some memorials tear at your heart. There are soldiers killed in combat and records of high infant mortality. Marked A on your back and at the end of the Jesus Chapel is the Nettleship Memorial, and by the font, marked B on your sheet, is the Brown Memorial. Both list 10 and 11 children who died in infancy, and both are put up by the surviving sibling. And on the Brown Memorial, it says, "Here lies a single flower scarce blown, 10 more before the northern door are strown, plucked from the selfsame stalk only to be transported to a better nursery." You can't believe the sadness that the families must have endured seeing these children die so young, and the same applies to one of the Paterson monuments. One poignant reminder of disappointment endured is the elegant ivory and silver baton in the Heritage Collection. This is the property, it is the a conducting baton of Dr. Edward Bunnet. He was deputy organist at the cathedral under the great Zachariah Buck. He did not succeed Buck, as it was widely anticipated, due to a rather vindictive dean. He was organist here for 31 years. He gave regular, popular Saturday evening organ concerts in St Andrew's Hall and on the newly opened pier at Lowestoft when it became a holiday destination. And he taught many Norwich children to play the piano and the organ. Bunnet was greatly loved and respected and had a lasting sense of humour, and St Peter's awarded him a pension when he retired in 1908. He wasn't very good with money, and he did have 12 children, so it was not an easy life. And when one pupil who'd got to give a public performance asked him, "Are you nervous, Dr. Bunnet, when you give a concert?" And he said, "Oh no, I look at the audience and I think of them all as pigs and I'm fine." So it's an example of facing life, facing disappointment, and just getting on with it. Fortunately, for those of us whose Latin is a bit rusty, we do not have too many memorials in Latin. But number 18 on your sheet is on the north wall of the Jesus Chapel to Isaac Fransham, Sadly, it's covered up at the moment. Isaac was another lawyer, born in the parish, but practicing in London. Perhaps that's why he obviously had his memorial made in his lifetime. For, as you can see, the date of his death is by a different hand and clearly inserted after his death in 1743, and he also commemorates his father on the memorial. He gave a silver gilt communion cup to the church, and it's in the Heritage exhibition. The cup, not the cover, that was another gift. Another, in Latin, is by the old organ case here beyond it, and it is to Augustine Briggs, the Jolly Cavalier, the nickname he acquired in the Civil War. He was a friend of Sir Thomas Browne and an executor of Browne's will. He was stripped of his aldermanic status and put in prison in the Civil War, but he survived, and after him, Briggs Street is named. He served as mayor in 1670 and also represented the city in Parliament. He resumed his civic activities after the war and left a charity on his death to apprentice children to a trade. His granddaughter Mary left the ground rent of a shop in the street to the church. And until, I'm not absolutely sure, but in my time, we received £4 a year from Burton's the tailors, who once occupied the site. I wrote to Burton's when I was churchwarden, suggesting that they might like to capitalise it and rather than fiddle about with this little cheque. I had a charming letter back saying, "Thank you so much. We didn't know why we sent it, but we rather enjoy doing it, so we will continue." And they did. It's another example of the past reaching into the present. Having seen Augustine Briggs Memorial, I must just mention the old organ case here. That's the original Renatus Harris case that stood at the west end of the church. And when in the Victorian period the church was reorganised, the organ was brought to the east end, and that was disposed of, and it was discovered in a house in Norfolk and brought back into the church. When it was originally at the west end, in the middle was a clock so that the preacher could see how long he was speaking. So when it got put here, it wasn't thought seemly for the congregation to know how long the vicar was preaching. And so Canon Merrick asked his son-in-law, Sir William Richmond, who painted Moses overlooking the Promised Land, and he painted his daughter, so it's the vicar's granddaughter who's in the medallion over the organ case there. Tucked in by the foot of the southwest column by the door under the stairs to the organ, mark C on your sheet, is the oldest monument in the church, and it is to Richard Anguish. He was a Cambridge academic and died in 1616. He was born in Norwich, and I'm not sure if he was one of the sons or the brother of Thomas Anguish, who left the great educational charity to the city. The charity survives and assists with education to the present time. As you will leave by the north porch, you will see a table tomb marking the Bolingbroke family, and at the far end, facing the City Hall, is a medallion to Sophia Goddard, a young actress loved by the Norwich theatre audiences. She died at 26, and was engaged to Sir John Harrison Yallop, who was mayor of the city in 1832 and knighted by William IV. He married eventually into the Bolingbroke family. In his shop on the marketplace, he sold the state lottery tickets. And on one occasion, so the story goes, he had two. One he sent back and one he bought for himself, and he won. With the money, he built himself a country house on Newmarket Road, the home of Norwich High School, which started in St Giles and went to the Assembly House, also in our parish, and then to Newmarket Road, and that is my alma mater. Let us hope that some such good fortune comes to our theatre and all those involved with the stage, for whom the present pandemic has been particularly hard. Our registers record many actors and actresses, but none seem to have had the wherewithal for a permanent memorial. The theatre is in our parish, and our clergy minister to those who work there and have done since its inception. The Bolingbroks and Sir John were parishioners, again, of the church, but they worshipped at the Octagon Chapel in Colgate. Thomas Ivory, who built the first theatre, which was fairly soon rebuilt because they had problems with it, was a builder, and he also seems to have acted as an undertaker, because it's thought that the pyramid memorial on the north wall to John Smith and the pyramid wall one here to the Patersons is by Thomas Ivory. And it's an old tradition for builders to be undertakers, and also he was obviously a monumental mason. So that is the story of some of those whose memorials you see: the grocers, the carpenters, goldsmiths and ironmongers, doctors and surgeons, the mercers and parish clerks, the casualties of Kett's rebellion, those who've died peacefully, those who have met a violent end far from home, the vicars, one who died halfway up a mountain, the lawyers, sheriffs, mayors and lord mayors, and latterly a bank manager and an entrepreneur and an organist and choir master. For a church is a book to be read. It's not a museum to be looked at. All these people have made a contribution to the life of the city and to this church, and have helped to make both what they are today. And what of those whose inscriptions have been erased by wind and water, rain and sun, and the feet of the faithful and the curious? They lie forgotten by those who hurry by the churchyard railings and who heedlessly throw their litter to swirl and whisper about their lasting resting place. For who in the church do not merit a downward glance unless you catch your heel in the indent? It is they, I suggest, whom we should remember, and whose memory we should keep green in our minds and hearts and before God. For the history is all around us. It is important, not because it's splendid and not because it's tragic, but because it has produced us. Our society and our church have grown out of the past, and if we try to forget the past, we destroy the present. For a tree dies if its roots are cut. What we see and learn is our inspiration for the future. And as number 21, we should heed the message of the 1418 War Memorial window in its last panel. It is from Isaiah. Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Here am I, Lord, send me. Thank you. If anyone has any questions, I don't mind.
Firstly, it gives me great pleasure to say on your behalf a vote of thanks to Barbara. Thank you, Barbara, for starting our talk this morning so typically with plagues, pestilence, reminding us of perhaps the situation we find ourselves in today. I never knew about Robert Kett's rebellion, people being buried over here in the Jesus Chapel. I have a great... I'm a great fan of all that happened back in 1549. I always found it very, very interesting as a Norwich boy. Also, of course, we all know about Sir Thomas Browne, but I also never knew about him and about the Norfolk Broads. You mentioned Mary Chapman. You may be interested to know that an existing memorial is going to be repositioned in our church. Will add to the history on our walls. In the space underneath on the south aisle where you see the very large memorial, there's a convenient spot underneath. That's just recently been agreed to be installed in our church, so it will appear shortly. And you referred to the women, and also you referred to them as wives and daughters, but I'm sure I've read somewhere that the women were referred to as relics.
As what?
As relict.
Relict.
Yes. Maybe my mother might like that one. Marion, what do you think? We'll just check my cousin.
Remaining.
Remaining, exactly. So, and also you've made us laugh with your anecdotes, most memorably, of course, about Bunnet and the pigs, and also the Burtons and the £4 cheque with the shop. Barbara, you are a custodian of so much knowledge, and you have given us so much this morning in the history of our city and the people who have served within it. But also we want to give a huge, great vote of thanks to you for serving us today with so much information. And there's lots to go away and look at in the building now. So on your behalf, may I say thank you, Barbara.
Pleasure.
Has anybody got any questions at all? Or Barbara could be available just to answer if anybody's got any questions afterwards, I'm sure.
Mm.
Is that okay? Yeah. Oh, the name of the police book, Barbara.
Sorry?
Name of the police book.
Oh, A Force Remembered. Yes, A Force Remembered. Do you know the... Yes. Morris Mawson, Morson. I've never seen so many tall men as when we dedicated that. They all came in great force, including Morris, who's still alive. And some years ago, he came in with his sons, and we baptised his grandson. And I said, "Oh, grandson." He said, "Yes, we only have boys." Future policeman. Anyone else? Any other monument you wonder what it is, I might be able to remember.
Well, thank you, everybody. May I just say that if you can just take your time in leaving the building, giving a social distance, and we all need to exit via the north door, which you've all learnt about. Do take a look at the tokens exhibition on the way out, which you've referred to.
Yeah.
The memorial inscription on that particular slab at the back, just behind where the lectern is at the back. So thank you so much for coming. If you'd like to make a small donation in a lovely clear box by the door, I'm sure we'd be very grateful for that. Thank you. Thank you, Barbara.
Pleasure. Yes. Don't know anything about it, haven't been able to find anything what's going to happen to it. It's great unlisted, so they can't put it down. It's just a question of what they're going to use it for.
Yes, I wonder